just simply will not survive, and the business won't thrive. Controls are not about empowering you as the watchguard over everything. Controls are about empowering the individual leaders of areas with the information and the actual doers of these steps. I want you to pull one thing from today that you can actively do to make your business more successful by implementing an internal control.
Now We Mastermind presents the Business Coach Podcast, answering your questions and providing real actionable insights for building a better, stronger, more profitable business without sacrificing your time, life, or freedom anymore.
Well, welcome to another episode of the Business Coach. I'm your host, David Finkel. In this week's episode, we're going to be talking about how can you implement guardrails, smart internal controls, to protect your business so that you don't have to micromanage. And what that means is that you can effectively trust with protections, safeguards, verifications in place. You can trust your team to get the right things done at the right time in the right way. As we think about this here, let's first of all talk about what is an internal control. So an internal control, if we think about this concept, internal control, it's a type of business system, but it's specifically about making sure that your business is protected so that somebody who makes a mistake or situation that changes or a system isn't quite producing the result that we need, that it lets you know in time for you to do something about it, right? That's what an internal control is. You have various kinds of controls. You know, if you've ever read a copy of Build a Business, Not a Job, we talk about 3 different types of controls, right? We talk about procedural controls, things like step 1, step 2, step 3, the recipes, if you will, in your business. Like, for example, if you run a consulting business and you have a new client engagement, you have a step-by-step process whereby you do your intake with a new business that you're consulting with, and then you have your process for how you produce your initial assessment report, and that's an example of a procedural control. You also have what we'll call visual controls, dashboards, checklists, metrics, checklists, things that let you see that the right step or the right is happening, or that the right result is there based on the number. So for example, in marketing, this happens all the time. You know, if you know that your cost per lead needs to stay under $500 per lead for that type of tactic to be profitable, and then all of a sudden you're looking at it and your direct mail cost for a lead has gone up to $1,000, it's doubled, that metric, that KPI, key performance indicator, now tells you, hang on, something's off here, we need to address it or adjust it. And you can set up your visual controls, if they're number-based, to be things that say, hey, this is when we're in the green, this is when we're in the yellow, and this is when we're in red, all hands on deck. Those are examples of visual controls. And then, of course, you also have the best version of controls, which we call embedded controls, wherein correct behavior becomes the automatic default behavior. So, for example, if you have a really well-designed new prospect email drip marketing campaign, once you get the sequence set up in your CRM correctly from the start, then automatically that you put a new person in there, that sequence, they're going to get the right emails at the right time, sending the right messaging. You don't have to think about, did I send them email number 3 of the series? I'm not manually sending it. Automation is an example of an embedded control. You can see this for example, in a manufacturing company, they'll have an ERP, an enterprise resource program, a computer software tool that runs their manufacturing process. Well, if things and steps are built in there, like for example, automated reorder of supplies and materials. You know, if you get down below a certain inventory threshold of raw materials for material X, you know, maybe it's aluminum metal because you run a CNC shop and you're cutting aluminum parts. Great. In your part, if you get below this threshold, it automatically triggers a reorder, or it automatically triggers an email to a person to do the reorder. Those are examples of embedded controls. The right step happens automatically because it's built in there that the default is the correct. So what does this give you? What do these specialty systems give you? Because it's a lot of work to put them in place. But what it gives you is it gives you your life back. What do I mean by that? Well, without good internal controls, here's what you're left wondering. Well, did they follow through and send the Sorensens that proposal that we were supposed to? Did we ever send to the bakers the invoice that needed to go there? Did we take care of payroll for our company this week? Did we? And you as the owner are left with a thousand things that are left where you're wondering about it. And these things rob you of peace of mind. These things steal from your attention when your best cognition should be going to those things in the business where you can contribute the most value. And it robs all of that. But good internal controls, they get rid of these things so I don't have to wonder or think about it. Now, I'm not going to have everything have good internal controls from the start, but even if I get a portion of them, these now become things that I no longer have to worry or stress about. Because I know that if something goes on with one of them, for example, where it's not working the way it's intended, that the system will somehow notify me or notify somebody to deal with and handle. And if they're not able to deal with and handle, it'll escalate it even more so that I have an opportunity. It takes the needle out of the haystack and says, hey, if this 1 in 1,000 situation comes up, this is how I want you to make sure I know about it so I don't have to monitor all the 1,000 things. You don't need to be on every conference call or Zoom meeting. You don't need to be sitting in every supplier negotiation. Why? For example, if your team is your buyer is able to get things under an acceptable price, that's part of your procedural control. If you can get your parts at X dollars per pound or Y dollars per thousand, and that price is suitable for you, then you don't need to have you double check it. But if they're going to be outside of that, then they can raise the flag and say, hey, pricing is different now from this supplier. I've gone back and I've actually have requests for bids from these 3 other suppliers. I'm still waiting on it. I'm just keeping in the loop because it's no longer our standard. It's now a yellow light right now. And if I can't get better pricing from one of these other pre-approved vendors, which is an internal control, a list of pre-approved suppliers is an example of an internal control, then what I'll do is I'll bring it back to your attention and you and I will troubleshoot it together. When you scale, I don't want you to rely on kind of like hoping that you can keep this all in your head. You can't. You can keep it in your head when you're at a $500,000 business. But when you're at a $5 million business, let alone a $50 million a year business, you cannot keep all this complexity in your head. You just simply will not survive, and the business won't thrive. Internal controls allow you to get it out of your head, to put it into the business's intellectual property, not in your head, so that the business can protect itself. Internal controls aren't supposed to be like a police officer hiding behind the bushes with a speed gun so that he can catch you going 40 in a 25 zone. No, that's not what it's about. It's about a speedometer so that you can look at your own dashboard and say, hey, you know what? I'm going a little too fast or a little too slow here. I now can adjust that because it gives me the feedback that lets me know is the result going. It also is like a pilot. It gives me a checklist. So before I go on the flight, I can do my safety checks. And at the end, I can do my close and shut down engine procedures so that it's set up for the next time and protects the productive engine there of the plane. The same analogous thing applies to your business. Controls are not about empowering you as the watchguard over everything. Controls are about empowering the individual leaders of areas with the information and the actual doers of these steps with the feedback to help make sure that they're doing the right things that get the right result. But at the same time, to protect them and your business, that if things are going left or right, or are under or shooting or going too high, that you can do something about it because you'll know about it. So that you don't have to wonder and worry about all these things until they reach a threshold that says, hey, you need to pay attention to that. It allows you to manage by the variance, not by the day-to-day, by the exception, by the thing that doesn't neatly fit into the box. That's what comes to your attention. That's where you create more value, not by monitoring the day-to-day stuff. It's really important. That's what controls are for. They tell you when things are working, and they make sure that the business and the doers and managers know when things aren't working in time for them to do something about it. So let's go through some more examples of some controls. So, for example, operational controls, right, to make delivery consistent and scalable. That might be like your standard operating procedure for how to fulfill an order or how to onboard a new customer. That might be the quality assurance benchmarks with how people rate the work. Like, for example, with coaching clients, this is a good example. So in our business coaching program, every quarter we do a quick 2-minute survey for our clients, asking them as part of the quarterly survey, where they're getting value 1 to 5, and with their coach, is their coach holding them accountable? How are they performing on their side of the equation 1 to 5? How valuable has it been? How good is their experience with? And if we're getting scores of 5, 5, 5, 5, 5s, we know we're doing our work. If we're getting scores that drop down to 3 or 4, we now have a yellow light. We can go back to that person and find, you know what, this person needs tougher accountability. We can tell their coach. Maybe they had a miscue. Their coach thought that they should hold them accountable this way, but the client actually wants more. Or it could be the opposite. Hey, my coach is too much of a hard case on me. I need a little bit more gentleness, right? Every client is different. But that feedback loop is an example of an internal control. Marketing controls we talked about, like the tracking that you do of your marketing. Like, where did this lead come? If I spent $10,000 this month on pay-per-click ads, what did that generate? All the leads getting tagged, so I can say, what's my cost per lead from pay-per-click? How many sales did I generate per dollar spent on pay-per-click? How much gross profit did I generate per dollar spent on pay-per-click? I mean, these are some really useful metrics. I remember when one of the construction companies we were working with that did a home improvement business, they were able to fine-tune their pay-per-click. That they were spending $500,000 a year on pay-per-click for this business. It was a big part of their ad budget. When we really looked at, for every $1 you spend on pay-per-click, how much gross profit are you generating? And when we looked at that, we were able to reduce by over $250,000 their pay-per-click budget. At the same time, they grew their revenue and profit at the same time. That $250,000 of savings, some of it went to some other marketing tactics that they had, direct mail and some other things that they were doing. But the majority of that dropped straight to their bottom line and went right into their pocket as additional profit. Internal controls give you that information to be able to do that. On the financial side, internal controls about things like budgets, and you're looking at your margins, gross profit margin, operating profit margins, those give you really useful information. And also internal controls there mean, how do I protect the business from dumb or fraudulent or outright stealing behaviors of team members, which doesn't happen very often, but good internal controls are important. So that would be like always having 2 people in the flow of money, right? One person initiates the payroll on the system. A separate person is the one who needs to be there to press send the money out to all your individual team members in the ACH payments. One person does the counting and getting ready for all the deposits of checks that came in. A second person checks the work, does the deposit itself, right? 2 people in the flow of money is an example of an internal financial control. Having audit trails, for example, setting up, if you're using a financial accounting software like QuickBooks, making sure that each person that's in your QuickBooks account have their own username and passwords, and having it set so that once they're in there, that they can't delete actions that they've done. So it always keeps a history. So there's an audit trail that if something was to happen there, people know that there's going to be a trail that shows who did what in there. Or if you have physical checks still, making sure that if they're there, they're kept under lock and key as an example of a financial control. Or if you have company credit cards, having a second set of eyes check through that bill to make sure it works there. And the list goes on with that. Those are some examples of financial controls. The key which, and this is really important, your internal controls, with an S, it's not about you, the owner, trying to micromanage or be in control of every element, right? That was the old you who was trying to keep all these things in mind to check on this and check on that and check on this and check on that. That's not you anymore. Internal controls allow you, the owner, to set up the structure so that you and your managers and leaders can make sure that the right things are happening in the business at the right time to get the right result. And if something is going off for that, it raises the alarm sound so that you can do something about it. So controls aren't about controlling, they're about clarity. They're about allowing you to have assurances, having these guardrails that your company's best resources are in fact put in the right places to produce the right results. It's what gives you confidence, not guesswork or intuition, but knowing, a knowing from that part. So look, I know today's episode was a heavy one. One of my promises to you as part of this podcast, it's been something that's driven me for the last 30 years of doing this work, working with business owners, which is I always had a frustration over people who would tell me what to do, but didn't give me concrete steps or detailed enough information for me to know how to do the what to do. So I'm looking today was fairly dense. So I want you to look at what's one internal control that you recognize that you need to implement in your company. It could be a visual control like a key performance indicator or some other metric that you want to measure in a business function, in your marketing or in your sales function, for example. It could be a procedural control like a standardized onboard checklist for a new client. It could be a HR procedural control like an onboarding checklist, or it could be an embedded control, for example, for a new team member, that every new team member is going to watch a message from you, the CEO, talking about your company culture. And that's an example of an embedded control. Why? Because every team member gets the same picture, the same information about you taking 7 to 10 minutes talking about your company's culture. And that's an important one, your company values, your company mission. That would be an example of an embedded control. So I want you to pull one thing from today that you can actively do to make your business more successful by implementing an internal control. If you're not sure where to start, my suggestion is pick one place where there's something about your business where you worry a lot or it draws attention from you because you don't know where things stand status-wise. And ask yourself, what simple internal control could you put in place that would improve the situation so that it's not such a drain on your attention, that there's some way that you or the business or the manager of that section of the business could know that it's going well, or if it's not going well, that it would raise the alarm, yellow or red flag for somebody to take a look at it who has more skill perhaps than the person doing it. Pick one thing. I want to say thank you for joining me for this week's episode of the Business Coach Podcast. I hope you had something valuable from today. Again, pick one idea and put it into practice. These small steps that you make week in, week out will compound over time, and over the coming months, quarters, and years will truly work magic in your business, helping you to scale without sacrificing your family, without sacrificing your health, and without sacrificing your life to do it. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.